Hi, this is Rachel, speaking to you now. Please do not drive or operate any machinery whilst listening to this audio. Some of the things I speak about may be triggering. Please make sure you are in a safe frame of mind to continue. This is not intended to be medical or mental health advice, and I am not a certified mental health professional. In the case of an emergency, please contact your local resources. Normalizing trauma. Ab und zu fehlt mir mein innerer Wortschmied. Now and then, my inner wordsmith seems to fail me. There are so many things to say, to express, to capitulate into words, that the time I spend slaving and rejoicing over this desk with pen and paper somehow doesn't give these sentient paragraphs justice. Yet from my mind to yours, if these words can make the slightest impact, be digested by you, seem a little bit relatable or at least intelligible to and from your perspective and the unique life story which you bear, then I have done my job as a writer, as someone so impassioned by that which I write and want to communicate, that the labor done over this desk is not work at all, but gives me instead a deep, meaningful connection to myself and a wide imaginary audience which exists only in the ether of the conceptual basis of publishing this book in the future. And yes, I get it, that I use uncommon words which come naturally to me, stemming from a lifelong love of not only the English language, but of others too. We grew up poor, but I devoured books and never knew of our social status. It wasn't a thing. And yes, my incessant, long, run-on sentences could be construed as confusing or even uncanny. But tell this to a seasoned poet who for 25 years has been composing singular and unique poems, and by the author you will get a nod of the head and an odd stare. I am who I am, and I am unapologetically me. I write for me, and I write for you, reader or listener. I write not for the masses, nor do I imagine an extensive audience. If you are still reading or listening to this, then I've done my job. And that inner wordsmith seems to be doing just fine. But your inner wordsmith, the fountain and origin of the words you use to express opinions and life experiences, how is it doing? Can you opine your way through a conversation? Or do you occasionally freeze up, find it difficult to come up with the words, and so you stay silent? Maybe English isn't your first language, or dementia is causing you to reach into the dark for the word that you need. Or maybe, just perhaps, you have been so taken, so traumatized, that saying the words, putting words to the experience is just too scary, too frightening, too everything. It's overwhelming. So if you sit alone with your feelings because you cannot bring yourself to put words to something that just doesn't even deserve to have any words put to it. Look, okay, as a writer and in my writings, I go back to the topic of trauma a lot. I think it's important. It's important to me. It doesn't have to be important to you. But the more we talk about it, the more we face the facts that every single one of us human beings have a history of trauma. And we need to talk about this so that we can normalize the fact that traumatic things can, will, and do happen to us, and that we are humans who can embrace our humanity and realize that we are fallible and susceptible to being actually genuinely and deeply affected by those traumatic things that happen to us, that we aren't always capable of identifying the event as a trauma, and that sometimes we need help from someone else in order to be able to navigate the traumatic event, even if this happens 30 years later. There is no shame in that. But if maybe we can face those fears that are inside of us, within our minds and our hearts, those fears about how scary it seems to even begin to face, to acknowledge the existence of, and to slowly begin to process the trauma or traumas, plural, in our life, then maybe, just maybe, we might begin to experience first compassion towards our younger and current selves, and then eventually muster up some compassion for other people. Because isn't it actually love that makes the world go round? Isn't the experience of giving and receiving this intangible concept and emotion of love what makes life meaningful? And not material things like the steak you ate at a fancy restaurant, or the type of cars you own, or your vacation home on the Amalfi Coast. First of all, the home, the car, they won't feed you, and the steak feeds you only for a day. But love can feed your heart and your soul for a lifetime. Love can heal the hurt and give meaning to your life. Am I saying that the resulting love that comes from trauma healing, first to yourself, then love for others, that it can heal some of the ills of society, put hatred underground, can make you no longer suicidal, can lift you from your depressive funk, can inspire others to do the same, to face their own fears too? Yes. All of that and more. For if I, as a writer and a poet, cannot be idealistic about the healing powers of love, which comes only from healing yourself first, the willingness even to heal yourself, then what is life? What is life without words and life without love? Will society, as we now know it, fall into the abyss of the crater of the pit of humanity, which harbors hatred of our fellow human, and resentment which hurts no one but you, and the shame and the guilt? Need I go on? Love is meant to be honest and patient and kind. You do not force love, but wait. Like gaining the trust of an abandoned, hurt puppy. Love is not boastful or vengeful. And if it was a person or people who hurt you, they did not do that out of love. They were informed only out of their sick illness. For those who hurt others are ill and not right in their minds. And they hurt you with ill intentions that were the exact opposite of love. For love has many enemies that take over susceptible people, and those people do such unimaginable harm. It's no wonder there are so many suicidal people on earth who are intent on ending their lives by suicide because their perceived emotional pain is too high, and their resilience and confidence and hopes have been so eroded that those protective factors seem to no longer exist. A person who is suicidal sees their life as hopeless and alone and completely barren, devoid of any possible redemption, so bleak and dark that the tunnel of depression, that the only so bleak and dark is that tunnel of depression, that the only possible way out is an intentional death. But a suicidal person doesn't usually want for death. They just want to end the torture, the pain. Why am I speaking of the topic of suicide? Because just as trauma can be normalized with conversation on that topic, suicide too can become a more normalized and therefore less stigmatized topic to be talked about. How many people hide their suicidal thoughts from their partners, their children, their friends, until it's too late. And so it seems that all of a sudden, that person turns up dead, shocking the community of people who knew this person when really this had been months and years in the making. What you may not realize, what that person may not have believed, is that trauma is treatable. You could have been raped, a natural disaster of the police or a military division, or you were bullied, a loved one died, your parents divorced. The list of possible ways of having been traumatized is endless, okay? For the general sake of this discussion, your trauma, what happened to you, is vitally important. But what is more important is that we talk about trauma as a topic. And you can never, don't you ever try to compare one person's trauma to another person's trauma. To a woman who had been sex trafficked for almost a decade, their distant aunt purported, "Well, those people from the Holocaust survived, so you should be fine too." This is an actual sentence which was uttered by a very ill-informed person on the matters of mental health. And what did it do to the niece who was a sex trafficking survivor? It made her feel unloved. It caused her to feel devalued, confused, ashamed of her own suffering, isolated, and suicidal even. This is why you must listen, have open ears and an open heart, hold space and nothing more for the person in your life who is suffering. It is okay to not know what to say. say nothing. Because words, they can hurt. The damage of saying words born of ignorance and of one's own hurt, which can seep out and affect others, the damage can be greater than that of a bruise, of a broken bone, of the physical ramifications of the trauma itself. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. This children's saying originated decades ago, and it is certainly outdated. For what we have learned is that words are incredibly impactful. The words we tell ourselves and the messages we get from other people. Words can be everything. Words can be the difference between life and death. How many stories in the news are there about a child who was bullied to the point of suicide because this child, or even an adult, could no longer take it? If you choose to remain ignorant of all of these matters which I have discussed, if you refuse to educate yourself on matters concerning the health of the mind, then please keep your opinions to yourself. Because all you then do with your uninformed and uneducated stance on behavioral health is to add to the ills of our society so that bigots remain bigots and the hating part of humanity continues to murder the others with weapons and with words, with unjust policies and procedures, with limiting access for more vulnerable populations to getting the care that they need, the therapy that they need, the strands of hope for them to hold on to so that one less person has to lose their battle of the fight with their depression and die by means of suicide, something which would have been preventable with proper treatment. Look, you don't wish to die, right? That is, if you are fortunate enough to not be suffering of an illness called depression, for you know that this illness does not discriminate and it can affect anyone, right? Right. We have a basic survival instinct as mammals and as humans, which is why, in an extreme example, a plane crashes on a deserted mountain, and in order to have a basic need met so you don't starve to death, some people resort to cannibalism, which in itself seems to be a derogatory term at times, with a negative instead of academic connotation, because we don't do this, right? Eat one another. So, the survival instinct wants us alive, yes? And we usually try to keep ourselves alive at all costs, yes? If someone was trying to blow you up, you'd try to get away from the reach of the bomb and save your children too, perhaps? And so people who have lost this survival instinct, who want to end their lives on purpose, they are not normal. Is this right? But instead of ridiculing those people who are suffering, who have lost all hope and want to end their lives to end the pain, instead of using choice, ignorant words to describe them like crazy and insane and weird and wonky, why don't we instead invite them back into society from the skewed outskirts of our society and into treatment programs, into clinics where medical, psychiatric care and psychotherapy is provided? Why don't we incentivize rather than penalize private companies to hire rather than fire people who have both mental and physical illnesses and disabilities? Why doesn't the media stop portraying mentally ill humans as solely criminals? And why don't the magazines and news outlets stop using derogatory, stigmatizing, choice words to describe human suffering of the worst kind? For those who suffer of ill mental health rather than healthy mental health, they are suffering. Why don't we begin to have conversations about and normalize human suffering? That is, that we all suffer at times, that we all have our own traumas to deal with in life, that your traumas cannot be compared to another person's traumas, that we all have mental health, whether our mental health is, quote, normal, unquote, and healthy, or whether the symptoms of an illness qualify for a diagnosis. And how many people are ill but undiagnosed, untreated, and therefore making another person's life a living hell? Everything I have discussed, they are not concepts. They are real things. How do I know some of these things? Because I have lived my life thus far, and I am still healing from it. Having trauma in your life, it is a part of the human experience. Healing or not healing from it, this is a choice, your choice. But some people, like my grandparents, didn't have the tools for having an open discussion about the ways in which we heal. But I do. So I invite you to open the door to someone in your life, to have an open conversation about suffering, to state out loud that to suffer is to be human, and to verbalize that we all have suffered from some form of trauma, and to keep that door open, to begin to learn to love yourself. Love whom you have become in spite of and because of the traumas of your past, and to realize that although they may seem near, that those past memories may intrude into your present tense, that those things are indeed in and of the past, that you must try to keep them there in the past, and that you begin to open the door to forgiveness of self first and foremost. Forgive you, forgive your past, and start to look at life through the lens of love in spite of your past traumas. It is possible. I would know.